The Roman Empire was a world where power often outweighed justice, where governors ruled with near absolute authority, and where a single command from the wrong person could determine whether someone would live in comfort or die in agony. In the 3rd century, amid the glittering temples and bustling streets of the Sicilian city of Catania, there lived a young woman whose courage would challenge the arrogance of one of Rome's most feared officials. Her name was Agatha. Born into a wealthy and noble Christian family, Agatha possessed everything that Roman society admired. She was educated, graceful, intelligent, and extraordinarily beautiful. Ancient traditions describe her beauty as remarkable, capable of capturing attention wherever she walked. Yet those who knew her best believed her greatest beauty was not found in her appearance, but in her unwavering devotion to Christ. While many noblewomen dreamed of advantageous marriages and influential husbands, Agatha had already made a decision that would shape every moment of her life. She had consecrated herself entirely to God, taking a private vow of perpetual virginity. In an age when women were frequently viewed as political assets or possessions to strengthen family alliances, such a decision was considered shocking. To Agatha, however, it was not an act of rebellion. It was an act of love. She believed that her entire life belonged to God, and no earthly authority had the right to claim what she had freely offered to heaven. This conviction would soon place her in direct conflict with one of the most dangerous men in Sicily. The Roman governor Quintianus was accustomed to getting everything he desired. Wealth, influence, military power, and legal authority surrounded him like an invisible armor. Citizens trembled before his judgments. Soldiers obeyed his every order without hesitation. When news of Agatha's extraordinary beauty reached him, curiosity quickly turned into obsession. At first, he viewed her as another prize to possess. A noblewoman refusing him was unimaginable. When he finally summoned her before his court, Quintianus expected admiration, perhaps even fear. Instead, he encountered a calm young woman whose eyes revealed neither panic nor submission. He offered luxury. She declined. He promised influence. She remained silent. He hinted that becoming his wife or even his companion would elevate her beyond imagination. Agatha answered with remarkable serenity, "My life already belongs to another." The governor frowned. "There is no man in Sicily greater than I." She looked directly into his eyes. "I speak not of an earthly man, but of Christ." Those words wounded his pride more deeply than any insult. For Quintianus, rejection was intolerable. For a Roman governor, rejection by a Christian woman was humiliation. From that moment forward, this was no longer about romance. It became a battle of domination. He convinced himself that Agatha's faith was merely stubbornness, waiting to be broken. He would destroy her resolve before destroying her body. Rather than ordering immediate torture, Quintianus devised something far more calculated. He believed that corruption of the soul was stronger than physical pain. If Agatha's faith depended on purity, then purity itself would become his first target. He ordered that she be taken from her family and placed under the supervision of a notorious woman named Aphrodisia. Historical traditions describe Aphrodisia as the keeper of a luxurious Roman brothel, a place overflowing with vice, temptation, drunkenness, manipulation, and exploitation. The governor gave clear instructions. Agatha was not to be executed. She was not even to be physically tortured. Not yet. Instead, she would spend 30 days immersed in an environment designed to erase every trace of her Christian identity. Aphrodisia accepted the assignment with confidence. She had spent years manipulating vulnerable young women. She understood human weakness. She believed everyone could be bought, seduced, frightened, or emotionally broken. No one, she thought, remained pure forever. The brothel itself was a prison disguised as luxury. Perfumed corridors concealed unbearable sorrow. Music echoed through lavish rooms where countless women had surrendered hope long ago. Expensive fabrics covered walls that had witnessed betrayal, exploitation, and despair. Every night, laughter mixed with hidden tears. Every morning, another piece of someone's dignity disappeared. Into this darkness walked Agatha. Unlike the others, she neither cursed nor wept. She prayed. When mocked, she prayed. When insulted, she prayed. When isolated, she prayed. The women around her watched with growing confusion. Many had entered that place against their will. Some had forgotten what hope even felt like. Yet this young prisoner carried herself with remarkable peace. She did not behave as though she had been abandoned. She behaved as though she was never alone. Aphrodisia began her campaign gently. She surrounded Agatha with elegant clothing. Jewelry was presented before her. Fine meals filled the tables. Musicians performed. Servants attended her every need. "If your God truly loves you," Aphrodisia asked one evening, "why has he allowed you to end up here?" Agatha smiled softly. "My Lord was also rejected by the world." The answer irritated Aphrodisia. Luxury had failed. She turned to psychological warfare. Day after day, she attempted to convince Agatha that chastity was meaningless. She insisted that youth faded quickly. Beauty disappeared. Faith, she claimed, would never protect her from Roman power. "You are throwing your life away," she whispered repeatedly. Agatha remained unmoved. "My life cannot be wasted if it is lived for eternal things." As the days passed, the attacks intensified. The household mocked Christian beliefs. They laughed at the resurrection. They ridiculed prayer. They questioned whether Christ had abandoned his followers. Some deliberately tried to provoke anger. Others attempted to awaken fear. Still others sought to convince her that compromise would save her life. Yet every attempt produced the opposite result. The more pressure surrounded her, the stronger her serenity appeared. The women living within the brothel began noticing something extraordinary. Agatha never responded with hatred. She never condemned those trapped around her. Instead, she spoke gently. She comforted the discouraged. She listened to broken hearts. She treated every servant and every exploited woman with unexpected dignity. According to ancient Christian tradition, her quiet presence transformed the atmosphere inside the house. Not because the building itself changed, but because the hierarchies of those living there slowly began to change. Some wondered who this Christ could be if his servant possessed such peace. Others confessed regrets they had never spoken aloud. A few even found themselves praying for the first time in years. Aphrodisia grew increasingly frustrated. She had expected to corrupt Agatha. Instead, Agatha's virtue was beginning to expose the emptiness surrounding everyone else. Near the end of the 30 days, Aphrodisia confronted her directly. "There has never been a woman I could not break," Agatha answered quietly. "There has never been a prison strong enough to imprison the soul that belongs to God." Those words lingered in the room long after the conversation ended. When the appointed month finally expired, Aphrodisia returned to Quintianus. The governor expected victory. Instead, he received a report unlike anything he had imagined. According to later Christian accounts, Aphrodisia confessed her complete failure. "It is easier," she admitted with bitter frustration, "to bend iron than to break the mind of that young woman." Quintianus could scarcely believe what he was hearing. 30 days surrounded by temptation. 30 days of humiliation. 30 days designed to destroy her convictions. Yet Agatha emerged exactly as she had entered, her faith untouched, her dignity intact, and her spirit stronger than ever. The governor's wounded pride now transformed into uncontrollable rage. He realized that persuasion had failed, psychological humiliation had failed, temptation had failed. Only one path remained. If her soul could not be conquered through corruption, he would attempt to conquer it through unbearable suffering. And so the instruments of torture were prepared. Had you ever heard of Saint Agatha before today? Have you or anyone you know ever received a blessing, a miracle, or the intercession of Saint Agatha? Write it down in the comments below. I read every single one of your comments, and I'll leave a heart on yours. If this story warms your heart, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends and family so they can strengthen their faith too. The saints were forgotten once, and together we will never let that happen again. The anatomical horror and the heavenly vision. The silence inside the courtroom was unlike anything the city of Catania had witnessed before. Word had already spread throughout the streets that the young Christian noblewoman had survived every attempt to break her spirit. The governor Quintianus had expected fear, surrender, or at least exhaustion. Instead, Agatha stood before him with the same calm expression she had worn the day she was first arrested. Her body bore the marks of imprisonment. Her soul did not. To the Roman governor, this was no longer merely a trial against a Christian. It had become deeply personal. Every refusal wounded his pride. Every prayer she uttered felt like a public challenge to his authority. The more she remained faithful to Christ, the more his hatred grew. Roman officials believed power was demonstrated through fear. If the population witnessed a prisoner refusing to bow before the empire, that defiance threatened the very image of Roman control. Quintianus decided that the punishment had to become unforgettable, not merely painful, humiliating, permanent. He looked directly at Agatha one final time before issuing the order. "You still have time," he declared. "Offer sacrifice to the gods of Rome. Renounce your Christ, and everything ends today." Agatha answered without hesitation, "My soul has already chosen its king." Witnesses later recorded that there was no anger in her voice, only certainty. Those words ignited the governor's fury. He ordered the executioners forward. The soldiers seized Agatha and stripped away the outer garments that identified her noble birth. The purpose was not only physical punishment, but public humiliation. In Roman society, exposing a respectable woman before strangers was itself considered a devastating assault on her dignity. Yet even then, Agatha showed no sign of panic. Ancient Christian tradition often describes the martyrs as possessing a supernatural peace during their final trials, believing that the grace of God strengthened them beyond ordinary human endurance. Agatha appeared to embody that tradition completely. Quintianus then pronounced one of the most horrifying sentences recorded in the early history of Christian martyrdom. The executioners brought forward massive iron pincers, heavy tools designed to grip flesh with crushing force. Unlike a clean execution, this punishment was intentionally slow. Every movement was calculated to maximize agony. The soldiers surrounded her while the crowd watched in stunned silence. Many expected her to scream before the torture even began. Instead, witnesses described her quietly praying. Her lips moved almost imperceptibly. She was not speaking to the governor. She was speaking to God. The first iron clamp closed with brutal force. The sound of metal striking metal echoed through the chamber. The executioners tore violently at her body. The injuries were catastrophic. The punishment targeted the very symbols of womanhood and motherhood, transforming the governor's obsession into an act of calculated anatomical mutilation. Blood flowed freely across the stone floor. Even some Roman spectators reportedly looked away. Although public executions were common throughout the empire, this particular form of torture shocked many because of its extraordinary cruelty. Quintianus expected the sight of unbearable pain to crush her resolve. Instead, Agatha lifted her eyes toward him. According to the ancient Acts of St. Agatha, she spoke words that Christians would remember for centuries. "Cruel tyrant, are you not ashamed to torture in a woman the very breasts by which your own mother nourished you?" The courtroom fell silent. No insult could have struck the governor more deeply. Agatha had exposed not merely his brutality, but his complete loss of humanity. Even while suffering unimaginable agony, she reminded him that every powerful man had once depended upon the tenderness of a mother. For a brief moment, the governor appeared speechless. Then his rage erupted once more. He ordered that no physician be allowed near her. No bandages, no food, no water beyond what was necessary to keep her barely alive. He wanted infection, weakness, and despair to finish what the torture had begun. The guards dragged her bleeding body back into the darkness of her prison cell. The heavy door slammed shut behind her. Night slowly descended over Catania. Inside the prison there were no lamps, only darkness. The cold stone absorbed the sound of every breath. Agatha's wounds should have been fatal. Without treatment, severe blood loss alone would likely have ended her life within hours. Yet she remained conscious. Alone, she continued praying, not for revenge, not for escape. Ancient Christian tradition says that her prayers were filled instead with gratitude, that she had been counted worthy to suffer for Christ, echoing the examples of the apostles described in the New Testament. As midnight approached, something extraordinary happened. The darkness inside the prison suddenly began to change. At first, it appeared to be a faint glow, as though moonlight had somehow entered a sealed chamber. But the light continued growing brighter. It illuminated every corner of the cell, without casting ordinary shadows. The frightened guard standing outside reportedly noticed the strange radiance leaking beneath the prison door. Some hesitated to approach, Others believed sorcery was taking place. Within the light stood an elderly man whose face radiated peace beyond human description. Beside him appeared another figure clothed in dazzling brightness. Christian tradition identifies the visitor as Saint Peter the Apostle, accompanied by an angel sent from heaven. Peter, who himself had once endured imprisonment for preaching Christ, approached the wounded martyr with profound compassion. The scene carried extraordinary symbolism. One servant of Christ who had survived persecution now came to strengthen another, preparing for eternal glory. The apostle spoke gently. "Agatha, have courage." According to medieval accounts, she recognized him immediately, not because she had ever seen him in life, but because heaven itself revealed his identity. Peter knelt beside her. There were no medical instruments, no herbs, no earthly remedies. He simply touched the terrible wounds left by the torture. What happened next defied every law of human anatomy. The bleeding stopped instantly. The torn flesh was restored. The catastrophic injuries disappeared completely. Her body became whole again, not partially healed, completely renewed. Ancient writers described the miracle with remarkable confidence, emphasizing that no scars remained where the torture had occurred. For early Christians, this healing was not merely a miracle of compassion. It was a visible declaration that God possessed authority over the human body itself. The same Creator who formed mankind from dust could restore what violence had destroyed. Agatha felt her strength returning. The crushing pain vanished. She arose to her feet, not slowly, not with weakness. She stood with the same dignity that had characterized every moment of her imprisonment. Before departing, the heavenly visitors disappeared as suddenly as they had come. The brilliant light faded. The prison returned to darkness, yet nothing inside that cell remained the same. Morning arrived. The guards cautiously unlocked the heavy door, expecting to discover either a dying prisoner or a lifeless body. Instead, they froze in disbelief. Agatha stood before them alive. Her face reflected peace rather than suffering. Her posture revealed strength rather than exhaustion. Most astonishing of all, the horrific wounds that should have marked her forever had vanished completely. The soldiers stared at one another in confusion. Some stepped closer to examine what they believed impossible. Others backed away in fear. There was no explanation that Roman medicine could provide. News of the miracle spread rapidly through the prison and soon reached Quintianus himself. When the governor heard the report, disbelief quickly turned into uncontrollable fury. He refused to accept that divine intervention had overturned his sentence. To acknowledge such a miracle would mean admitting that the God worshipped by this young Christian possessed greater power than Rome itself. His pride would never allow such a confession. Instead, Quintianus convinced himself that even greater cruelty would finally accomplish what humiliation, imprisonment, torture, and mutilation had failed to achieve. He began preparing a punishment so savage that the entire city would be forced to witness its terrifying outcome: the earthquake and the miraculous veil. By the time Agatha was brought before Governor Quintianus for the final time, the atmosphere in Catania had changed completely. She was no longer viewed simply as another Christian prisoner awaiting execution. Stories of her endurance had spread through the streets, the markets, and the homes of the city. Servants whispered about the noblewoman who could not be broken. Soldiers quietly repeated the astonishing account of the mysterious healing inside the prison. Even among those who still worshipped the Roman gods, many wondered whether the God of the Christians truly possessed a power greater than that of the empire itself. Quintianus sensed the shift. It terrified him. Rome ruled not only through military strength, but through fear. If ordinary people began believing that a condemned Christian woman stood under divine protection, his own authority would begin to crumble. His obsession had become desperation. This was no longer about forcing Agatha to deny Christ. It was about silencing the miracle she had become. Determined to erase every trace of hope, Quintianus ordered an execution unlike anything the city had ever witnessed. His executioners spent hours preparing the place of punishment. A massive fire was built in the center of the execution ground. Thick smoke climbed into the Sicilian sky as flames devoured enormous piles of wood. Iron tools stirred the burning coals until they glowed with an intense orange light. But the governor considered blazing embers alone insufficient. He wanted every movement to become unbearable, Large fragments of broken pottery were scattered across the glowing coals. Sharp shards of ceramic mixed with jagged pieces of shattered glass and rough stones, creating a surface designed to tear flesh apart while the fire consumed it from below. It was a horrifying combination of crushing, cutting, and burning. The executioners had prepared a bed of agony. When Agatha arrived under heavy guard, the crowd fell into complete silence. Many could scarcely recognize the young noblewoman who had once walked through Catania in elegant garments. Yet despite months of imprisonment and torture, her face reflected neither bitterness nor hatred, only peace. The governor rose before the assembled crowd. "This ends today," he declared. "For the last time, offer sacrifice to the gods of Rome." Agatha slowly lifted her eyes toward him. "My sacrifice has already been offered to the living God." The governor clenched his fists. Without another word, he signaled the executioners. They seized her. The scorching heat from the fire could already be felt several steps away. The air shimmered above the glowing embers, making it difficult even for the soldiers to stand comfortably nearby. The executioners threw Agatha onto the burning surface. Instantly, flames surrounded her. The razor-sharp fragments beneath her body tore into her skin as they rolled her across the fiery bed according to the governor's command. Every movement exposed fresh wounds. The burning coals seared her flesh, while broken pottery sliced through already injured skin. The smell of smoke filled the air. The crowd watched in horror. Some turned away. Others covered their faces. Even hardened Roman soldiers, accustomed to public executions, struggled to witness such calculated cruelty. Yet through the unbearable suffering, Agatha continued praying. She did not curse her executioners. She did not beg the governor for mercy. Ancient Christian tradition remembers that her strength came from an unshakable conviction that physical suffering, however terrible, could never separate her from the love of Christ. As the torture continued, an unexpected sound interrupted the cries of the crowd. A deep rumble echoed beneath the earth. At first, many believed it was distant thunder, but the sound grew louder. The ground itself began to tremble. The vibration rapidly intensified until buildings throughout Catania started shaking violently. Walls cracked, columns swayed, roof tiles crashed into the streets. People stumbled as the earth rolled beneath their feet. Panic erupted. The executioners released Agatha as they struggled to keep their balance. The violent earthquake spread across the city with astonishing force. According to ancient accounts preserved by Christian tradition, part of the governor's own palace collapsed during the chaos. Massive stones crashed downward, crushing two of Quintianus's closest advisors beneath the rubble. Dust filled the air. The once orderly execution ground dissolved into confusion. Citizens fled in every direction, convinced that divine judgment had fallen upon the city. Many shouted that the God of the Christians had answered the prayers of his faithful servant. Even pagans who knew nothing of Christian doctrine found themselves overwhelmed by fear. Natural disasters carried deep religious significance in the ancient world. To Roman minds, earthquakes often represented the anger of supernatural powers. In that terrifying moment, many began asking themselves whether they had witnessed the punishment of an innocent woman. The crowd's emotions quickly shifted. Hours earlier, they had gathered to watch an execution. Now they demanded that it stop. Cries rose from every side. "Enough! Leave her alone. She has suffered enough." Quintianus looked around in disbelief. His carefully planned display of absolute authority had collapsed before his eyes. The people no longer feared him. They feared the God whom Agatha refused to deny. Unable to restore order, the governor reluctantly ordered that Agatha be removed from the fire. The soldiers lifted her broken body from the burning embers. Her injuries were severe beyond description. Her strength was nearly gone. Yet witnesses observed that remarkable serenity still rested upon her face. She was carried once more into the darkness of her prison cell. There were no physicians waiting, no attempts to save her life. Her body had endured imprisonment, scourging, stretching, mutilation, burning, and countless other forms of suffering. Humanly speaking, there was little hope of survival. As night settled over Catania, Agatha understood that her earthly journey was nearing its end. Ancient prayers attributed to her express not fear, but gratitude. She thanked God for allowing her to remain faithful. She entrusted her soul entirely into his hands. On February 5th, around the year AD 251, her earthly suffering came to an end. Christians believed that the young woman who had refused every compromise entered eternal life as a victorious martyr. Her body was reverently buried outside the city. Very soon, believers began visiting her tomb to pray. What happened afterward transformed Agatha from a local martyr into one of the most beloved saints of the Christian world. Roughly 1 year after her death, Mount Etna, the towering volcano that dominates the Sicilian landscape, erupted with terrifying violence. The mountain roared as fountains of molten rock burst into the sky. Rivers of glowing lava descended toward Catania, consuming everything in their path. The people had witnessed eruptions before. They knew there was little anyone could do against such overwhelming natural power. Families fled, carrying whatever possessions they could rescue. Parents clutched frightened children. Farmers abandoned their fields. The city braced for destruction. Then an extraordinary idea spread through the terrified population. Christians hurried to Agatha's tomb. According to ancient tradition, the burial place preserved a veil that had covered the saint after her death, a simple cloth associated with the woman whose faith had overcome unimaginable suffering. In desperation, the people lifted the sacred veil and carried it in solemn procession toward the advancing lava. Remarkably, they were not Christians alone. Even many pagans joined them. Fear had erased old divisions. Standing before the blazing river of molten rock, they stretched the veil toward the approaching destruction. The lava continued flowing, closer, closer still. Then, according to one of the oldest and most enduring traditions of Sicily, the impossible happened. The fiery current slowed, its relentless advance stopped. The molten rock hardened before reaching the city. Catania was spared. Generations of Sicilian Christians would remember that moment, not merely as a rescue from a volcanic eruption, but as a sign that the witness of a faithful servant does not end with death. Throughout the centuries that followed, devotion to St. Agatha spread far beyond Sicily. Churches were dedicated in her honor across Europe and eventually throughout the Christian world. She became especially revered as the patron saint invoked against eruptions, earthquakes, fire, and disasters, as well as the protector of women suffering illnesses of the breast, her own martyrdom forever linking her compassion with those enduring similar pain. In Catania, her memory never faded. The city continued living beneath the shadow of Mount Etna, yet generation after generation carried the story of the fearless young woman whose unwavering faith had outlasted the cruelty of an empire and whose name became forever intertwined with hope in the face of overwhelming catastrophe.